My boss tried to ruin me. Then I showed the receipts. The first red flag was subtle, almost invisible. A client meeting, a new campaign for a line of organic dog treats. I'd spent weeks crafting the presentation, pulling together market research, designing mock-ups for social media ads. Richard, my boss, sat next to me, nodding along as I presented. The client loved it. "Brilliant, Amy," they said. "Exactly what we were looking for." Later, back in the office, Richard called me into his office. "Good job, Amy," he said, his tone surprisingly flat. "But I had a few suggestions that I slipped in there. Helped close the deal, really." I frowned. "Suggestions? I don't recall. Subconscious cues, Amy, you wouldn't have noticed. Years of experience, He gave me a patronizing smile. I let it go. Maybe he did add something. Maybe I was being sensitive. But Sarah from sales caught me in the break room. "He's doing it again, isn't he?" she asked, her voice low. "Doing what?" "Taking credit. He did the same thing with the Peterson account last month. You spearheaded that campaign and he walked away with all the glory." I shrugged. "He's the boss. It's his job to oversee things." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Oversee? He sits in his office all day, reading golf magazines. You're the one doing all the work." That night I couldn't sleep. Sarah's words kept echoing in my head. I replayed the client meeting in my mind, searching for those subconscious cues Richard claimed to have added. I found nothing. Things escalated quickly after that. Richard started assigning me impossible deadlines. He'd give me a project on Friday afternoon, due Monday morning, knowing I had plans. He'd exclude me from important meetings with clients, then complain that I wasn't in the loop. He even started making snide comments about my work in front of other colleagues. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "Amy," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I've noticed a slight dip in your performance lately. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've just been a little overwhelmed lately." "Overwhelmed? Marketing is a demanding field, Amy. Maybe it's not for everyone." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Maybe you're not cut out for this." That stung. I'd worked my butt off to get where I was. I'd sacrificed nights and weekends, poured my heart and soul into my work. And now he was questioning my abilities. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every project. I kept meticulous notes of Richard's behavior, the impossible deadlines, the snide comments, the blatant attempts to undermine my work. It felt like a paranoid obsession, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The dog treat campaign, the one that had started it all, became the battleground. Richard started making increasingly bizarre demands. He insisted on changing the ad copy at the last minute, scrapping entire sections of the website, and demanding endless revisions to the social media strategy. Each change was designed to make the campaign less effective, less appealing to the target audience. The client loves it, I'd argue. They're happy with the current strategy. "I know what's best," he'd retort. "Trust me, Amy, I have a vision." His vision was a disaster. The campaign flopped. Sales plummeted. The client was furious. During the post-mortem meeting, Richard threw me under the bus. Amy was in charge of the day-to-day execution, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. I tried to offer guidance, but she seemed resistant to my suggestions. Perhaps she lacked the experience necessary to handle such a complex project. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and expose him for the manipulative, insecure bully he was. But I held my tongue. I knew I couldn't win in that environment. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall. I felt defeated, demoralized, and utterly helpless. Sarah called me, her voice full of concern. "I heard about the meeting," she said. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm not okay. He's ruining me, Sarah. He's systematically destroying my career." "Then fight back," she said, her voice firm. "Don't let him win." "How?" I asked. "He's my boss. He has all the power. You have the truth," she said, "and you have evidence. Use it." Her words gave me a spark of hope. I spent the next few days poring over my documentation, organizing my evidence, and crafting a plan. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I decided to go to HR. Emily Carter, the HR representative, was always friendly and approachable. I hoped she would listen to my concerns and take action. I sat in her office, nervously fidgeting with my hands. I explained everything, from the subtle credit stealing to the blatant sabotage. I showed her my documentation, the emails, the meeting notes, the project timelines. Emily listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When I was finished, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Amy," she said, "I understand your concerns, but honestly, this sounds like a personality conflict. Richard is a valued member of the team, and he's always been a strong performer. I'm sure you can work things out between yourselves, but he's deliberately undermining my work," I protested. He's sabotaging my career. I'm not saying that's not happening, she said, her voice carefully neutral. But these things are often a matter of perception. My advice is to try and communicate more effectively with Richard. Maybe schedule a meeting and discuss your concerns openly and honestly. I stared at her in disbelief. Was she serious? She was dismissing my complaints as a personality conflict. Was she blind to what was happening? I left her office feeling even more defeated than before. It was clear that HR wasn't going to help me. The system was rigged. The final straw came during a crucial presentation to the client. I had prepared for weeks, meticulously crafting a new marketing strategy to revitalize the dog treat campaign. I had data, charts, and compelling visuals to support my recommendations. The presentation started well. The client seemed engaged, asking thoughtful questions. But then, disaster struck. When I tried to pull up the sales data, the charts were corrupted. The numbers were completely wrong, showing a massive decline in sales that simply wasn't true. I panicked. I tried to recover the data, but it was no use. The charts were completely unusable. Richard, who was sitting next to me, leaned in and whispered, "Looks like someone didn't do their homework." The client was furious. They accused me of incompetence, of wasting their time with inaccurate data. The meeting ended in a shouting match. I walked out of the conference room, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I knew with absolute certainty that Richard had sabotaged the data. He had deliberately set me up to fail. That was it. I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. I was ready to quit, to walk away from my career and start over somewhere else. But then I remembered Sarah's words, "Don't let him win." I went back to my office, closed the door, and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let him win. I was going to fight back. I knew I couldn't go to HR. They wouldn't listen. I needed to go higher up, to someone who would take my concerns seriously. I decided to go to David Lee, the senior director. David was a respected figure in the company, known for his fairness and integrity. He was also known for valuing data and evidence. I knew it was a risk. If David didn't believe me, I could be fired for insubordination. But I had nothing to lose. I drafted an email to David, requesting a meeting. I explained that I had serious concerns about Richard's behavior and that I had evidence to support my claims. To my surprise, David responded almost immediately, scheduling a meeting for the next day. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the meeting, meticulously organizing my evidence. I printed out emails, highlighted key passages, and created a timeline of Richard's actions. I even enlisted the help of Kevin, a junior marketing assistant who had witnessed some of Richard's mistreatment. Kevin was hesitant at first. He was afraid of losing his job, but I convinced him that it was the right thing to do. "He can't keep getting away with this," I said. "He's hurting people. He needs to be stopped." The next day I walked into David's office, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. Richard was already there, sitting across from David, looking smug. "Amy," David said, his voice serious. "Richard tells me you have some concerns." I took a deep breath and launched into my presentation. I laid out the timeline of Richard's actions, starting with the subtle credit stealing and escalating to the blatant sabotage. I presented my evidence, the emails, the meeting notes, the project timelines. Richard sat there, smirking, shaking his head dismissively. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Amy is a disgruntled employee who's trying to damage my reputation." I ignored him and continued with my presentation. I showed David the corrupted sales data from the client presentation, explaining how Richard had deliberately sabotaged it. "He set me up to fail," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "He wanted to make me look incompetent in front of the client." David listened intently, his expression unreadable. When I was finished, he turned to Richard. "Richard," he said, "do you have anything to say?" Richard stood up, his face red with anger. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "Amy is making all of this up. She's obsessed with me. She's trying to destroy my career." "Do you deny that you made these statements in these emails?" David asked, holding up a printed email. Richard hesitated. I don't recall," he stammered. "Do you deny that you changed the ad copy at the last minute against Amy's recommendations?" "I was just trying to improve the campaign," Richard said, his voice weakening. "I thought it needed a fresh perspective." "And what about the corrupted sales data?" David asked. "How do you explain that?" Richard was silent. He shifted his gaze away from David and avoided eye contact. That's when I played my trump card. "Kevin," I said, "can you tell David what you saw?" Kevin, who had been waiting nervously outside, walked into the office. He looked pale and frightened, but he stood his ground. I saw Richard deleting some files on Amy's computer," Kevin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He told me to keep it quiet. He said it was for the best." Richard's face turned white. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. David looked at Richard, his expression stern. "Is this true, Richard?" he asked. Richard finally broke. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice defeated. "I did it. But it was for the good of the company. Amy was incompetent. She was ruining the campaign. I had to do something to protect the company's interests." David shook his head in disgust. "That's not how things work here, Richard," he said. "You can't sabotage someone's career because you don't like them. That's unethical, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable." David suspended Richard immediately, pending an internal investigation. He thanked me and Kevin for coming forward and assured me that the company would take appropriate action. The next few days were a whirlwind. The HR department launched a full-scale investigation, interviewing witnesses and reviewing documents. The news of Richard's suspension spread throughout the office like wildfire. Some colleagues were shocked, while others admitted they had suspected Richard's behavior all along. Sarah was my rock throughout the ordeal. She offered support, encouragement, and a much-needed dose of perspective. "I knew you could do it," she said, giving me a hug. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself." Finally, the investigation concluded. The findings were damning. Richard was found guilty of misconduct, abuse of power, and attempting to sabotage a colleague's career. The company's decision was swift and decisive. Richard was terminated, effective immediately. I was vindicated. My reputation was restored. My colleagues respected me. The company even offered me a promotion, recognizing my hard work and dedication. But the biggest reward was the feeling of knowing that I had stood up for myself, that I had refused to be a victim. I had fought back against injustice, and I had won. I decided to stay at the company, at least for now. I wanted to use my experience to help others who might be facing similar situations. I wanted to create a more positive and supportive work environment. A few weeks later, I was walking down the hallway when I saw Kevin. He smiled at me, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. You inspired me to be brave." I smiled back. "We did it together," I said. "We all did."